There was a famous political saying, and I think it's Abraham Lincoln, who said, "You can fool most of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time." I think something like that along the way the quote goes. But it is incredibly true in modern politics, and especially true for Brexit. Remember at the referendum, the Conservatives, and even at the 2019 general election, the Conservatives made big promises about what Brexit would bring to this country. They promised all kinds of stuff. Extra money for the NHS never happened. Betterment of workers' rights. Again, we're going to get into that. Is Brexit really good for UK workers? We'll get into that in a bit. We've already seen recently a hardcore Brexiteer who said prior to us leaving that Brexit would be amazing for UK farmers, and he was really happy to vote for Boris Johnson's withdrawal bill. Only just a couple of days ago, he's now come out and said, this isn't the Brexit I voted for. This is unbelievable. But this will happen more and more and more. They made big promises, and the less they keep their promises, the less they'll be able to fool people. Like the other famous saying goes, what is it? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool me a third time, I don't know, maybe I'll never get fooled again, as the Who once sang. Dear me. But we're going to go out and go cover one of the big promises that the Brexiteers made, that this would be better, that Brexit would be better for UK workers. So the question is, will it actually be so? So before we go jumping into today's article, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And also down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee. And there's also YouTube memberships open as well, should you like to support me that way as well. So, as always, let's dive into this article then. This comes to us today from The Guardian with the title, Brexit would be better for UK workers, Boris Johnson promised. But will it? The European Commission's plans to protect people in precarious jobs in the gig economy could be the most ambitious extensions of workers' rights from Brussels since Britain left the EU. If adopted, the plans would mean that gig economy companies such as Uber and Deliveroo would have to treat workers as employees with minimum wages where they exist, sick pay, holidays, and better accident insurance unless they could prove that drivers and couriers were generally self-employed. Workers would also get greater protection against management by algorithm, which would mean that they cannot be denied work or fired by a machine whose code is wrapped in security. The British government will have had no hand in making these rules, nor any obligation to actually apply them. After all, that was the point of Brexit. Yet, British policymakers and firms operating in the UK may now find it hard to avoid the gravitational pull from Brussels. EU law applies only to 450 million people in 27 member states, but its effects can be felt far more widely as global companies adopt EU rules across their businesses to cut costs or to avoid complexity. The so-called Brussels effect can be seen in the reach of the EU's data protection rules, as well as the standards on chemicals, cars, and food safety. Nicholas Smith, the EU Commissioner for Jobs, suggested the same effect could very well apply to these latest gig economies plans. This standard will now influence not only the 27 member states and their platforms operating in the 27 member states, this will probably also become some kind of standard which will apply to other countries or even other parts of the world, he told The Guardian. The judgment might be too soon to call. An estimated 500 gig economy companies are active in the EU. They will probably respond in very different ways to EU legislation, which still has to be agreed in complex months-long negotiations between the EU ministers and the EMPs. Some firms could choose, of course, to treat gig economy workers as employees, as the Dutch company Just Eat does, or the Danish cleaning company Hiffa which offers employee status to those who've worked more than 100 hours on its platform. Many more will seek to adapt their business model or just quit a country altogether if they see no way to be profitable. In the UK gig economy, companies are having to respond to rulings from courts rather than the new legislation. The landmark ruling from the Supreme Court earlier this year uh, defined Uber drivers as workers who are entitled to the minimum wage and holiday pay, and the category of worker as distinct from employee and the self-employed was set out in the 1996 Employment Rights Act. George Miller, an expert on the gig economy at the London School of Economics, said that companies should ought to take advantage of the ambiguities in a law written in the pre-internet age. At the moment, it feels like gig workers are often coming from some of the most disadvantaged backgrounds, and they have been left to bear the costs associated with trying to fight for their basic rights in court. This shouldn't have happened. Boris Johnson was elected back in 2019 on a manifesto promise to introduce measures to protect those on low-paid work and in the gig economy. An idea expanded, of course, in the Queen's speech that year with a pledge to bring forward an employment bill which will protect and enhance workers' rights as the UK leaves the EU, making Britain the best place to work in the world. Nearly 2 years after that speech, no employment bill has been published by the government. While the pandemic has knocked many plans off course, this could also be an unsettling debate about what Brexit really means. When trying to get his EU withdrawal bill through the Commons back in October of 2019, the Prime Minister voiced his commitment to the highest possible standards on workers' rights, saying, "Whatever the EU comes up with, we can match it and pass it into law in this country." The sentiment he voiced on that day is far from shared across the government. And of course, a very little noticed speech in the Centre for Policy Studies last month, where the Brexit Minister David Frost threw his weight behind a low-tax, low-touch regulation economy on a different path from the EU. If after Brexit, all we do is import the European social model, we will not have succeeded, he said. These latest EU proposals will add pressure on the government to meet its promise for stronger employment rights, following a pandemic that has exposed dependency on low-paid workers in care homes, supermarkets, and in delivery vans and on bikes. The EU proposals will undoubtedly help to inform and inspire unions in the UK, said Tim Sharp at the Trade Union Congress. This is a government that came into office following Brexit, saying that they would protect and enhance workers' rights. I think if workers in the European Union are seen to be gaining rights and having power, then workers here would expect the same. A spokesperson for the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy said, the UK has, quote, one of the best records on workers' rights in the world, going further than many EU countries in many areas. And we believe the UK's current employment status flexibility strikes the right balance between the flexibility our economy needs and the protection for workers. Basically, essentially saying, we're all right. We don't need these new standards. We don't need these new rights. Don't be silly. Don't be silly. We don't need these. But this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen more and more and more. Be it social justice or even economic justice coming from EU rules like this, we will see this more and more. And then the question will be asked, because again, this is a debate that many of these Brexiteers do not want to have, which is, what was Brexit really about? Johnson and the rest of these Brexiteers made huge promises that Brexit would be better for the UK in many areas, and one of those areas was worker rights. And again, this is an area where Labour can really take the bull by the horns and tackle this, because even if they were to just say, copy and paste the EU legislation, and the Conservatives were to say, but that's an EU rule, they can turn around and say, but this EU rule is better than what we currently have in the UK. And you said you would make workers' rights better. This will make workers' rights better here in the UK. It's a fantastic strike, and it will be yet more proof and evidence that we were far better off in the EU than we ever were here where we are now. And again, as we said at the beginning, they made lots of promises, and they are not, or they will not want to cash all those checks that they promised to sign, not only back at the referendum, but back in 2016, back in 2019 as well, when Boris Johnson won. That's what is going to happen, and that's what we will see happen. And sooner or later, people will realize that. They will cotton on. You know, you can only promise to level up so much before essentially people cotton on and realize, well, actually, you're not going to do it. And people already are cottoning on in the North that they haven't really so far developed or even delivered on their leveling up promises and agenda. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button on your way out. Also, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And also, there is now the YouTube memberships as well, where you can support me, support the channel through there as well. So, as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.